Make it happen.
And with that, we are live for episode 86 of Trek Live, our weekly live show where we talk about Star Trek and other things. In this episode, we're going to be talking about this week's Discovery episode. So if you have not watched this before we get into it, you got to watch it. It's going to be heavy spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, how you doing this morning, Bill?
Really good. Definitely good. Can't believe it's already been 13 weeks of Discovery recaps. I got one more to go after this one. So really, this is going to be a difficult one to talk about, though, because like I've seen on, I always post those episode grade polls after each episode. And there were quite a few people who were like, I can't give it a grade. It's incomplete. And as serialized as this show is every week, this is a clear like first half of a two-part story. So we're going to do our best and cover as much as we can. There's a lot to talk about, obviously, but this is all very much hanging on what happens next week. We don't have very many conclusions to take away from this past episode. So Rob's in the chat. How you doing, Rob? Good to see you.
Morning, Rob. Or
if anybody else, yeah, afternoon there. Anybody in the chat, we want to hear what you have to say about this episode. I'm very interested to hear what people think is coming in the finale and potentially in season 3. And we're coming up on the very end. So if you have definitive thoughts on how season 2 is going and is it better than season 1? Is it not as good as season 1? Do you miss season 1? I want to hear all that stuff. So anything you have on your mind, definitely share and help. Like I always say on Twitter, help drive our conversation. We're going to respond to you and go whatever road you want to go. So chime in if you're in the chat.
Yep.
How is your rewatch going, though, before we get into the Discovery?
It's going good. I watched a couple episodes last night. I think I'm up to last episode I watched was Sub Rosa. And then the next episode is Lower Decks, which is a favorite of mine. So
yeah, Lower Decks is definitely a classic. Sub Rosa is definitely not. I saw you tweeting about it last night. Is it as bad as its reputation suggests it is? Is it underrated? Does it have the camp value that like some of the worst episodes of Star Trek also have? Like, how'd you take it?
It's not the worst episode of Star Trek ever. I feel like I hate knocking Star Trek, but it's definitely up there for me. I think the reason why it feels so bad to me is because I feel like this run of episodes was pretty consistent, actually. I'll start with an episode that I really liked, Parallels, and then Pegasus. Both two kind of strong character episodes that I loved. And then Homeward was solid and had some fun stuff. A little bit frustrating with the Prime Directive, but and then Sub Rosa after that, which I think that's the reason why I'm giving it maybe a harsher grade, because it is kind of stuck in the middle of a really consistent run of 3 or 4 episodes for sure.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. A lot of people would knock season 7 of The Next Generation for being kind of inconsistent, and I think you're coming up on the point where maybe it starts to get a little bit more inconsistent, but it actually starts fairly strong. Like the early crop of episodes, maybe a little bit inconsistent, but the Gambit 2-parter and, like you said, Parallels, the Pegasus, Lower Decks coming up. There's a lot of good stuff in the first half of season 7. There's some stinkers for sure, but I think Sub Rosa feels abnormally out of place, I guess, because it is following a pretty good run. It's one of the reasons I think it's kind of a shame is I've always really liked Dr. Crusher. I love the actress. I think Gates McFadden's really good when she gets opportunities to do stuff, which isn't very often. She's definitely one of the lesser used characters in that show, and having this be one of the episodes where she kind of gets the spotlight and gets the opportunity to kind of carry the episode feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity. Unlike Brent Spiner, for example, or Michael Dorn or Patrick Stewart, obviously they have plenty of opportunities to kind of flex their muscles and get to carry the weight of an episode on them. And Gates McFadden not so much. So it's kind of a shame that one of the handful is such a like iconically notorious misfire.
Yep.
But yeah, I find that it has some camp value that makes it unusually watchable, I guess. Like it's definitely got some unintentionally funny stuff in it, some memorably bad imagery, like the grandmother coming out of the coffin and stuff. Like, it's just ridiculous. But it's certainly not boring. Like, you got to give it that. I mean, maybe some people would call it boring, but I find it campy enough to kind of not be like dull. So yeah, cool.
Yep.
For me, I am my like official rewatch is kind of paused, and I kind of said last week that I'm probably going to wait to hit the TOS movies until Discovery's wrapped up and I'm out of that headspace. But I did rewatch over the last week and a half the first season of Discovery and the short tracks, with the idea of hopefully somehow maybe getting season 2 done like right up before the finale. So I'm hoping to knock a few episodes a day out up until Thursday to get in position to watch the finale with like the whole thing in my recent memory. So yeah, I'm glad to say I kind of go back to Discovery pretty often, so it's not like it's been that long. But season 1 really holds up pretty well. I'm surprised at how much while season 2 is so new and shiny, season 1 held my attention and really held up.
Pretty well.
I would love season 1. Yeah. We're very much on the record, you and I, last year when we were covering it, being fans of the show, and I'm glad to say that it's still true. So definitely love season 1. I really, I've said this before too. I think I appreciate Jason Isaacs more every time I go back and rewatch it because there's so many layers to his performance. He gives so many subtle hints and little winks to the audience once that really kind of make his performance that much deeper. And yeah, it's got some really cool stuff in it that I definitely like. And the short tracks, after this week, the short tracks are really kind of coming into focus a little bit. Obviously, the Brightest Star, the Saru one, we've already kind of covered, and that already played a big factor. But as we get close to the very end here, the first one, which I don't think people expected, Runaway,
did not expect it.
Yeah, is a huge role. Yeah, like that's Runaway. All of a sudden is like essential viewing if you're watching Discovery, which is kind of unusual. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Like that almost makes that's presence makes the short tracks like in between seasons 1 and 2. You got to watch them. The only one that hasn't really factored that much, if at all, is the Harry Milde one, which is kind of like a fun little aside, I guess, that maybe won't factor quite as much. But 3 of the 4, I think we're going to get real ties into season 2, which is really cool and makes the short tracks even more kind of valuable and makes me more glad that they happened. So, one thing I would recommend, since I just watched it this morning, if you rewatch anything before the next episode, the last episode, I would rewatch Calypso. There's a lot of like little pieces of dialogue that may or may not, I don't know because we haven't seen the episode yet, may mean something after you know what happens in the finale. And it holds up really, really well. I think Calypso still is one of the best things Discovery's done. I think it's like top of the line Star Trek. So yeah. But the last thing I'll say is I am trying really hard to. My hope is that after not this coming week, but maybe the following week, like in 2 episodes of Trek Live, I'd love to have episode rankings ready to go. That's what I kind of have in mind watching season 2, and I'm hoping to have Trekkie Awards for season 2 ready to go. So in my like upcoming, hopefully rewatch season 2, I'm trying to watch it through the lens of, best cinematography. Who are the best guest performances? So definitely looking forward to trying to put that together and have that thinking cap on watching the show. I haven't done that yet. I usually don't think about it that much while I'm watching it for the first time or like in the throes of watching the season as it comes, but I'm trying to do it now. So
yeah, it should be fun. Should we jump into the episode?
Yeah, this is Rob's first question. Is are we gutted to see Pike go? Kind of maybe we can wrap that into like the intro for this episode. You know, the season's coming to an end. Pike's obviously been a huge factor in the season, and the show has not been shy in the behind the scenes portion of like the production team, kind of telling us that Pike's not in season 3. So yeah, I am, you know, gonna miss Pike. I'm not convinced. We're going to talk, I'm sure, about the Enterprise, the set for the bridge, and how much money and resources they put into that.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that they spent all that money for a one-time use. So maybe we haven't seen the last of Pike. And I don't know. I mean, who knows? I wouldn't. Would I be shocked or, you know, totally taken aback and surprised if an announcement came in the semi-near future that maybe that spinoff that everybody's hoping for might happen? Not really. I think it's very much in play. At the Paley Center event a couple weeks ago, when Alex Kurtzman was asked about it, he very slyly said no comment. He didn't say no. So, and I mean, just look at that set. I just have a really hard time that they build it for, you know, a couple episodes and to take it apart and put it in mothballs. So maybe, you never know.
I mean,
but
on the flip side, though, I'm just trying to weigh each options. I think that they had to go that level to pay homage to, because I feel like the bridge was going to be under a microscope. So I think they had to bring it, you know, up a level, you know, for that iconic bridge. So
yeah, if you're gonna do it, you got to go all out. If you go cheap on something like that, if you're gonna dabble in recreating that, you're gonna get burned. So they did what they had to do, but it is. I mean, we're gonna talk about it. I have all kinds of questions about it, but it's spectacular. I mean, spoiler alert: I loved every second of that stuff. So, but what were your overall thoughts of part 1 of Such Sweet Sorrow?
It's hard to give overall thoughts on a part 1 like you talked about in the beginning. I thought it was a strong start. It got my juices flowing of you know what's gonna happen in part 2 and into season 3, which is crazy to say. I think it did a good job of kind of building everything up, and get me excited for the next episode. So overall, I think it was good.
Yeah, I think it's very much teeing up, you know, the action element that I'm sure we're gonna get in season 2.
Yeah.
But it's very character focused. Like it's got a structure that's almost like checking the boxes with paying off character or at least advancing character arcs. You know, you get your Spock and you get a Spock and Burnham scene. I believe you get a Burnham and Sarek and Amanda scene. You get a Stamets and Culber scene. It's certainly like moving everything forward and maybe giving us our last character beats before I'm sure the everything hits the fan in part 2. You have to imagine that part 2 is going to be pretty balls to the wall action.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that people knocked this show for in the first season was being too like plot heavy, move from point A to point B without a focus on like quiet character moments. And this
is a character moment episode.
Yeah, it's nothing but character moments. Yeah. So it's one of those things that, you know, sure, somebody could come back and say, you know, there's a happy medium. The right room to be in is somewhere between season 1 and something like this episode. But, you know, I certainly appreciated the kind of room for to breathe and feel like I'm living with these characters and in this kind of situation. You know, in this dire situation where decisions are being made about how to move forward and try to save the day. And I like that these kinds of things weren't just done off screen and alluded to. You get to see a lot of meaningful stuff. So I'm glad they did it. It's pretty clear that I don't know if you watched it, but there was an interview with Michelle Paradise that after the new After Track, the little interview thing that they do the day after each episode. Michelle Paradise is the new showrunner for season 3 and one of the co-writers on this episode. And in the interview, she said that this episode was originally like they were going to do 13 episodes, and this was 13, and as they're like breaking it, they're like, there's way too much to do here, and they got to extend it out to be like a two-parter. And that's certainly what it feels like. It feels like a beefed up big episode. And I think back to like in Voyager, even like way back, I remember Dragon's Teeth being an episode that was supposed to be a 2-hour that they whittled down to a 1 hour, and people like criticized it, thinking that it was too whittled down and too rushed, and that kind of that reputation tagged that episode, and it's been something that that's its reputation. It's an episode that's too crowded and too rushed and too packed with action, and is too big of a concept for an hour. And this is the opposite. I appreciate that we're getting more instead of less. So I like all the character stuff that we get in this episode, and we'll talk about more specific, doses of that. I'm sure as we go, but because there's a lot. But I like the approach, and I like the episode a lot. And I am also very eager for part 2, obviously. Leaves you wanting to know what's going to happen.
Yep.
So the episode opens with a continuation of last week. They're getting ready to auto-destruct the Discovery to get rid of the sphere data to keep it from control, and they're evacuating over to the Enterprise. And there's all kinds of like cool tech stuff. You get to see like these evacuation modules that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that come out of the ship attached.
Yeah. And that leads to this, extended teaser with the crew kind of getting onto the Enterprise and trying to blow up the Discovery. And that's where we see the bridge, we see a corridor, we see a turbo lift, all kinds of cool Enterprise stuff. What did you think of that opening? Like all that stuff, that portion of the episode?
It felt really big, and it was awesome. I think it was a really strong way to start the episode, and I think it just carried that momentum kind of throughout the whole episode. And I think it's like a prequel that I think that a lot is changing on the Discovery. People are moving off. A lot of things are happening, which is the same thing I could say about what's happening in the show. There's a lot of things happening. It's going to change. So I liked it. I thought it was cool. It was big. It was bold. It was awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I liked all the tech stuff, and I liked the bigness of we get little tastes of that throughout the franchise. The two-handed self-destruct, that always feels big and important. Pike and Saru having to do it together reminded me very much of like TNG. There were a couple episodes where Picard and Riker have to do it together to make auto-destruct, make it happen, or try to make it happen at least. Thought that was a cool continuity little touch. Yeah, I like the evacuation tubes too, Rob. I thought that was pretty cool imagery, something new, something different that feels legit. And yeah, I mean, I was definitely kind of in a daze. I thought the corridor set on the Enterprise was great. The gridding
felt big. It felt TOS.
Yeah,
it felt lived into. It was awesome.
Yeah. I thought the corridor was great. I thought the turbo lift was awesome with the little handle thing. Yep, that's really cool. Nice touch. And I thought the bridge was gorgeous. I thought the bridge was, like we've talked about before, I think the right way to go with something like this. And this is always a challenge. This is a difficult thing that the show is asking for by setting itself at this time, pre-TOS and playing with that timeline. If you're going to do something like this, the right approach seems to be, extrapolate from the original concept and do what is the closest you can come up with that is like a natural extension with more resources, more money, more budget. With the original idea. Don't get too cute and redo, which many would tag like the Kelvin timeline Enterprise as being like they went too far and redesigned it. I think that if the 2009 movie had this bridge design, it probably would have eased a lot of people's pain. People who were not fond of that design, that ship, and that kind of left, got that whole idea of the Kelvin universe, Kelvin timeline off to like kind of a bad start for a lot of people.
Right.
This seems to be the more apt approach. So it felt good. It felt natural. It felt like, a modern approach to the same idea. So the colors, the sounds, yep, all looked looked and sound really appropriate, I guess. And it made me not question it. So definitely a fan. Penske File is asking a really good question. That's a bigger picture question for the season. And I have to admit, just on first, I too am questioning this, and it's not 100% clear at this point. Why does Control need the sphere data? Control is certainly operating as, its own thing at this point. It has self-interest. It has, a mission. It's doing something. It seems to be, reasonably self-aware. What is it about that sphere data? I guess it's this. I don't know. What is it about that knowledge, that stuff that allows potentially Control to like evolve to the next thing, the next step? I think it asks some interesting questions about like the pursuit of knowledge and what more knowledge can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've wondered that myself. Penske File. I'm getting ready to rewatch season 2 with more of a. I'm hoping more of in a more condensed period of time where I'm going to try to unpack these things. But it's a good question that I don't know if there's a definitive answer for it. I don't think the show has provided those answers. From like a nitty gritty, like,
Yeah, we talked about kind of in the past that, at least for me, like to have like a villain or an antagonist that has to have depth and motivation, and right now I'm not sure. It's like it's trying to get the sphere data to become self-aware, but right now isn't it operating as a self-aware entity? And I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's one of the many questions that I have for next week and into season 3 and beyond. So.
Right, and I'm not sure we'll ever. I'll be curious to know. I mean, if we ever get an answer to that, I suspect maybe we won't. But Penske File says if they had said that it used the future technology to destroy life, that's one thing. But they simply bomb planets. Well, first of all, like the sphere has knowledge from the past, so it's. My impression of the sphere, and I could be wrong because I haven't rewatched it with that kind of lens yet, is it doesn't have like foresight into the future. It doesn't know what's coming. I don't think it would have knowledge of future technology. It has a vast knowledge of things that have happened long into the past, like for example, the Iconians are like a society that lived way in the past, and theoretically the sphere would have that knowledge. Future knowledge in the sense that it hasn't been invented yet, sure. Yeah, like the Iconian technology, like we certainly, the humanity in the 23rd century and even the 24th century don't have that capability, but the Iconians did, so yeah, sure. It has the ability to unlock those sorts of, those doors, I guess. But yeah, it's certainly a good point, Penske File. And he asked the question, do you think Discovery villains have been poor, okay, or good? He has, in his opinion, the series has had a problem with villain motivations. Dan and I certainly had our thoughts about the idea of going to the mirror universe in season 1. And because the mirror universe has this issue, I think, in a lot of ways, like by its very nature, like, okay, it's a flipped version of us that's evil. That carries with it, like there's a certain like silliness
I get what
to
you're
that.
saying. I get what you're saying.
That is, and by going there, you're kind of asking for that, I guess, because these guys are bad because they're. I think the idea of is their environment makes them bad. The Mirror Lorca and Mirror Giorgio are products of their environment, and they're bad because they're brought up to be bad, as in the way that we view bad. Having just watched season 1, in the line of what the mirror universe is through the TOS and Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, it feels as natural to me as those previous outings have. So I don't think I have quite as much of a problem as you do, Penske File. I know you're a little tougher on the show, and that's certainly respectable. You're Rob asks, "What do we think of Poe coming back?" We kind of alluded to this earlier. That I mentioned I rewatched the shorts, and Runaway is factoring large in the wrap up of the season. What do you? And we already kind of said that we were surprised by it. What do you think of the character? What do you think of her involvement as this kind of key to moving the story forward?
Yeah, I think I liked it. I think it felt natural. I think it's Discovery using its resources that it's already set. So I'm glad that they came back to it. I think the character feels natural. I like the character. She's definitely fun with Giorgio and a few of the other characters, but yeah, I liked it. I thought it was natural and it fit right in.
Yeah, I kind of like the casualness of her. I like the loose, relaxed tone that she sets. It's something that you don't get a whole lot of in Star Trek. She's certainly a unique animal. And the other thing I would say about it is in these last handful of episodes, Tilly's certainly been kind of pushed into the background a little bit. By bringing her back, it gives Tilly, a little something to do. It kind of wraps up an arc that was, is continuing an arc, I guess, that was started with that short track, with that relationship. It leads to, I have all kinds of questions about like, when Runaway happened, and like having just rewatched it, like she's she beams her off the ship, like where does she beam to? Like there's all kinds of like questions that I'm sure I'll be racking my brain about for a long time about like where it fits in the timeline and how that'll happen, because the crew doesn't know her. Like it kind of surprised me that like Burnham, nobody knew that she existed, that it ever happened, which was not something I expected. And it was certainly an interesting choice. But I thought it was cool to bring that story back. They certainly alluded to in Runaway that planet, Zahia, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's sort of an unusual place where the society that lives there and the planet itself are twins, they call it. They came about at the same time, which is certainly a unique idea that we haven't heard in Star Trek before. And that the nature of that implies that this is an unusual species and that they have they've been around a long time, obviously. So they seem to have evolved capabilities. She can camouflage, and she certainly has a lot of she's established as having a lot of technical knowledge and know-how in Runaway. She's a very smart individual and comes from a planet that's pretty evolved technologically. New to warp drive, but has obviously had a lot of breakthroughs on its own planet. Access to dilithium and things like that. So it was cool to see. I didn't expect it. I saw screenshots of it a few days before the episode came out, so I kind of knew it was coming. But had I not seen that, I certainly would have been surprised, and I was surprised to see the screenshot. So I'll count myself as a surprised person that Poe came back. What did you think of Burnham's scene with Sarek and Amanda? Like, did you feel like that was necessary? Did you feel like it was it as emotional as it was going for? Was it successful? Did you feel like you needed that? I don't know. Like, how did you feel about that? That's a pretty big moment in the episode.
I think it was needed. I think, again, this season finale to me wraps up a lot of loose ends, and to me, their relationship, the four of them, excluding Cybok, we don't know anything about that, but I think it needed to be wrapped up, and I think it made her decision to kind of go to the future a little bit tougher. I think they just keep building up that decision. With the relationship she's leaving behind and stuff like that, and I think it worked for me. It was definitely emotional, and I think the performances from the actors were tremendous as well. So I want to give it props to that. But yeah, I think it worked for me.
Yeah, I can tell you, the last thing I rewatched, Brother, and Brother leans pretty heavily through flashbacks and scenes with James Frain as Sarek. The season opens with Burnham coming into the Spock, Sarek, Amanda household. So it certainly, I felt like it was necessary because that was leaned so heavily into this season. An exploration of that family dynamic and Burnham's, who Burnham is, and what her family background is, and her relationship not only to Spock and Amanda and Sarek, but even her biological parents, which I don't think people saw coming. We ultimately got later in the season. So, in keeping with that theme that is very much present throughout the season, I think it made sense to figure out a way to have them have a moment before the shit hits the fan in the last episode. So I certainly appreciated that. I thought that it was well written. I felt good about the evolution of that family dynamic. I continue to really like Mia Kirshner as Amanda. I think she's really, really strong. I think she's been strong since she was introduced last season. But she's arguably had a bigger role to play this season. Maybe not arguably, I don't know, than James Brain has as Sarek. I think we've seen more of Amanda than we have Sarek this season. And I think she's capitalized on her screen time pretty successfully. So I appreciate, and they had to. It wasn't. They certainly would have been roasted for it, I think.